I kind of do want to veer away from the free agent talk, and I do want to go to the free agents that have signed because there's a lot that have already gotten
Mhm.
their bread. Uh, the first one obviously pains me, but I knew this was going to happen. Is Max Scherzer goes to the New
Mm.
York Mets for 3 years, 130 million cojones, and I mean shit. Like I don't even care if that would have been like the worst team in baseball. If someone's paying me 130 million for 3 years, I'll take that in a heartbeat. I wanted to ask you guys though. Obviously, it's just a matter of who pays the most, but do you think that was an overpay for Max Scherzer?
Yes. I
Whoever wants to
mean,
go first. I mean, like it's
I don't know, Mateo, are we on the same page here? Or like, I don't know. It's a lot of money, man, but
It's a
he's
lot of
also a
money
good
for any
pitcher.
player. It's a lot of money for
It
any
is.
player. But I mean, Max Scherzer is a guy who has broken the salary record like what, two, three times now for starting pitchers. Like
Mhm.
he sets the trend for salaries not only in baseball but in professional sports. So Max Scherzer is a guy who's used to having the league bend to his whims when it comes to his pocketbook, right? But if you're gonna give up that kind of money, you're going to want a premier pitcher, and you're getting that in Max Scherzer. And I get it. There were some concerns in the playoffs with, his arm felt like he was falling off, but I feel like that also,
bullshit.
sorry, Evan, but I feel like that might have also been a little bit of mismanagement from Dave Roberts.
It was. I know.
Um, I, I don't think it's entirely fair to pin that on Scherzer. I don't think he's got like a dead arm or anything like that. So I don't think it was,
No, I
necessarily a
agree. The
terrible move
way
for the Mets. But I think, if you're going to give up that kind of money, you expect a premier pitcher in baseball in return. And Scherzer's going to have to prove a lot to earn that contract.
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, he's 38 years old. So, I mean, even if they could get 2 years out of that deal, I think that was kind of just the ideal. And then the third year is kind of an added bonus if it ends up working out. But, Mario, do you have anything else to add to that? Or,
I think the Mets are getting something. I don't, well, not that I think. I know they're getting something good out of Max Scherzer, and you bring in a guy like Mateo was saying that's going to kind of bounce off of his point. You bring a guy for that amount of money, and no player in the MLB is worth that amount of money. But Max Scherzer continues to push and raise the ceiling of his financial stability, and you want a guy with certainty. And Max Scherzer, you're going to pay a guy that amount of money to get certainty. Max Scherzer is the guy that you're going to want to go with. I think out of all the pitchers in the league, he's the one that stands out to me that's going to be the one who earns that kind of money every other sort of years. But no, terrific signing by the Mets. I don't blame them why they didn't go after him. They have the money, the capital, and they have a player at their hands trying to find another team. They're going to pay him and they're going to get good success out of him. So good signing from the Mets. I can't wait to see if the Mets do anything with him. I don't want to see him waste his
Yeah.
time in Flushing because no, I have a bit. Also, I played my almost my entire baseball career with these guys, Milton Mets. So big soft spot for the Mets organization just because I
they
wore their jersey for so
drafted
long.
they drafted him.
Yeah, exactly. I was picked up from them, and yeah, I played a lot of the year with them. So I wanted the Mets do well, just for purpose of name value.
For sure. And I like move on to the next Dodger that left us was Corey Seager.
Mm.
That
Damn.
was tough.
But you know what? He was an absolute. Here's my little soliloquy on Corey Seager. Drafted in the first round, man, and God, did he embrace LA? I mean, won us a World Series. And I think that's why it's just easier for him to leave and also just for Dodger fans to accept the fact that he left. And if you looked at his Instagram picture when he posted that he was going to the Rangers, there was nothing but love from Dodger fans from him. It was very hard to find people that said, like, oh, fuck you for leaving. Like, I think everyone was very happy that he got his money and it was very well deserved. 10 years, $325 million. If you want to put that into perspective of what LA had to pay him in order to keep him, LA would have had to pay $410 million to keep Corey Seager based on the amount of money he's able to make in Texas with the no state taxes. Oh my God. And then I guess we could veer right to the next one is Marcus Simeon, who is now his partner in crime. And
Yep.
holy shit. 7 years, 175 million. They have both of those guys locked up for the rest of their career until they're 37 years old. And oh my God, like that's just in a crazy amount of money. I don't think Corey Seager got overpaid. I think he's worth the value. I think Marcus Simeon did get overpaid a little bit, but when you're the Texas Rangers and you have money for days, overpayment doesn't mean Jack Cajones. So
Yeah, it's kind of like I said at the top of the show with the whole Freddie Freeman thing. If you can give a player that seventh year, you're going to sign them. It's
Yeah.
it's been happening in baseball. It's what players want when they
The
reach
trend.
that age, because players are old when they get to free agency in baseball. They
Oh
know
wait,
that they
can
have
I
one or
say
two contracts in them.
can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I kind of knew Corey Seager was leaving right when we traded for Trey Turner, because that was kind of
Mm.
like, okay, like we have our, because apparently the Dodgers did offer him a contract, did offer Seager a deal, and he said no. I think he just wanted to test free agency, and respectfully, he should.
Yeah.
And I think right when they got Trey Turner, I texted my dad saying, "All right, there goes Corey Seager. Like, there's no chance that the Dodgers re-sign him because it doesn't make sense to." But continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought there was room for Seager and Turner to coexist. I think, whether it's playing Seager at second base or whether it's having Lux at second base and Seager and whether it's having Turner at second base or having Lux at second base and Seager Turner in center field. I can't talk. I'm confusing all my players. But there
Yeah,
was a situation in which that would have worked and it would have been a very
yeah,
good offense could it have happened. But, the Dodgers have enough depth to recover from that kind of a
yeah,
slip.
Gavin.
Mhm.
Yeah, I keep talking so much about this, but I think like the reason why they also said bye to Seager was that Trey Turner at second base defensively was not working out
Mm.
as much as I would have liked it. He did have a lot of a lot of errors that were kind of unforced, and I think he's just better suited for shortstop. So, and then Mario, if you want to talk about Simeon or Corey Seager.
I'll talk about both of them in respect to what the Texas Rangers are doing. I don't know, Matei, I really want to get your thoughts on this, and Evan, feel free to
Yeah.
chime in as well. How many years are we going to see burned off of those deals from
Mm.
Semien and Seager? Because they're not in contend now mode. Like when they made those two signings, I knew, yeah, you got the money to pay. You're going to go get them if you can. But like the rookie in, I believe Garcia had a terrific year last year. There's just not a lot of things outside of those two players that you're building around. They didn't have a core, really, so to speak, to build around and add those guys. Those guys are somewhat now at the age that they are. They're their core, which is really strange to say. I don't know. Are you buying in on the Texas Rangers? When are we expecting to see these guys start putting up numbers and leading them to a potential postseason? Because it's definitely not this year, at least
I
in
mean,
my
it's
opinion.
it's definitely not going to be instant, but it's one of those things that you pay them now and you hope in 3 years you're in a better situation, kind of thing. I think it's a little bit similar, obviously not as exaggerated of a situation, but a little bit similar to what the Phillies did with Bryce Harper.
Yep.
Right? They
For
they
sure.
knew they weren't in a situation in which they could necessarily compete. Maybe they thought they could win a weekend at least, right? But they definitely didn't think they were they weren't world beaters. But they signed Harper, they locked him up to a massive contract with the intention of putting pieces around him in the next coming years. And you're seeing that the Phillies are, they're an up and coming team. They're not there yet. They need to make moves. They need to get a little more additions, whether that's through pitching, whether that's through the bullpen, whether that's through the offense a little bit. It's not a perfect team, but they've got a core to build around. They've got Bryce Harper. And if you can have, two Bryce Harpers, right? If you can have,
Yeah,
the best second baseman in baseball, and you can have Corey Seager, who, when healthy, is a top five shortstop in baseball. And
yeah.
that's your core that you're building around, and you have a ton of young pitching prospects in the pipeline. You're going to get good draft picks in the next couple of years. You've got some potential to build with that team.
Yeah, it's interesting to me though, because I understand why Corey Seager wanted to go to a place like my guess is that Corey Seager just went to the place that offered him the most money. And ironically, he goes to the Texas Rangers where he absolutely lit it up in that ballpark during that bubble season. I mean, remember in the NLCS against
Oh
Atlanta,
yeah,
he hit like 7 home runs in one series, which is just absolutely unheard of. And that's where he won NLCS and World Series MVP. So it fits perfectly for him. I understand it for him because he's 27. He's already got his ring. So the only thing left is to get a huge payday. Marcus Simeon's a little confusing for me because he hasn't won a ring yet. But at the same time, it's like, I'm just gonna go. If this team's offering me 175 million and I'm gonna keep a majority of it because of no state taxes, I'm living in an awesome city in an awesome area. Like, why
yeah.
not? Sometimes it's like, yes, a World Series ring is nice, but at the same time, it's like, let's get the money first. And if a trade happens in the future, then a trade happens in the future.
And
Yeah,
you have to be a fool if you're Marcus Semien to not cash out after the year he had with Toronto. Like I
Oh yeah,
think
no, 100%.
I think the whole purpose of coming to Toronto was to build that value up. That's why you sign
exactly.
that 1 year deal. That's why you try to, it's like we were talking about with what Trevor Story could be interested in doing,
Mhm.
right? But it's really interesting to see that the Jays offered him the same like annual amount as the Rangers. It was that seventh year that pushed them over the edge, right? So
Well, it's all about security when he's what is he, 30?
exactly.
So it's all about
I think he's
security at
30.
that
Exactly.
point.
It's financial security. And it's like you said, the state taxes. He's played in California and Ontario. Those are two of the highest
Highest
taxed cities in Major
in
League Baseball.
yeah. Or
So,
no, like in their
in
respective
well,
countries.
in North America as well, but like Ontario
Yeah.
taxes are comparable to California taxes. It's about time he gets a bit of a break. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, exactly.
I can't blame him for going after the money. There's no hard feeling for Semien. He had a fantastic year for my Jays last year, and you wish him nothing but the best in Texas.
And it would have been nice for him to get into the playoffs, man. It would have been nice.
It would have.
Just a couple games. Oh.
Yeah, well, that's why like Dylan, another one of our buddies, made that like video about how the divisions in MLB are so stupid, and I completely agree with that because, I mean, talk about it. The Dodgers were a 106-win team that had to play in the wild card game. Like that just unheard of. But anyway, let's go to another Blue Jay is Robbie Ray, who goes to Seattle for 5 years, 115 million. And then Kevin Gausman goes to Toronto for 5 years, 110 million. So I want to ask the two Blue Jay fans, what do we think about that swap?
You go first,
Mario,
Mateo.
you want to go first? Oh, you want me to go first?
Yeah,
all right.
sure.
Yeah,
You got the bias.
Look at the two gentlemen.
A little bit of a bias. I mean, as somebody who got to watch Robbie Ray over the last couple of years, to see the strides that he took with Pete Walker and to see, in depth how he reinvented his motion and how that sort of propelled him to a Cy Young season was really interesting. But the thing you got to consider with Robbie Ray is the guy is a 2-pitch pitcher. He is fastball, he is slider, and he's got a damn good fastball and a damn good slider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the peripherals suggest that he shouldn't have had as good of a season as he did. Right. If you look at the projections, if you look at the advanced stats, and I don't like to do this with a lot of players, but when you're talking about locking up a player to a massive deal like the Mariners did, you got to do your homework. Right. And I do believe that a guy like Gausman was a bit of a safer bet than Robbie Ray. I mean, credit to Pete Walker. He's a miracle worker. And I really do hope that Robbie Ray, like this is the version of Robbie Ray, because baseball is better when players are better, right? Like I want to see this version of Robbie Ray. I don't care if he's playing for my team or not playing for my team. Obviously I want to see Gausman do well as well, but Robbie Ray is a 2-pitch pitcher, and that is a very dangerous game to play. He gave up a lot of home runs last year. Almost all of his runs came from the home run. And, if you start missing your pitches, like we know Robbie Ray has had command issues, you start walking people and you start missing down the middle, those solo home runs that he was giving up last year, they're going to turn into 2-run shots, 3-run shots, and that ERA is going to go through the roof. So it's a deal for Seattle that's a little bit risky. I can't blame them for taking that risk, but it's a deal we could look back in a couple of years and say, oh man, maybe that wasn't smart. But
And
as far as Gausman goes, I'm excited to have him on the Jays. I'm excited, that splitter is nasty. I'm excited to, see what he can do for this team and hopefully take us to the playoffs.
And Mateo, I just want to ask you this one question, because you've obviously followed a lot more Robbie Ray than I have, even though we live in the exact same city, which is quite weird. But no, you follow Robbie Ray. Can I ask you this? Was he taken, and I could be completely wrong, it's just a question in the dark here, but was he taken by the Jays like a situation where Semien was taken, boost his value, and then go to another team? Or did they offer him fair amount of value? I don't remember that far back. I'm kind of lazy to pull the numbers in front of me.
It was a trade at the deadline, if I remember correctly. It was a deadline deal, and then they offered him a 2-year deal just to be sort of like a back end of the rotation starter, with the intention that maybe Pete Walker could fix his control issues, because that was the issue with Robbie Ray. He was, he was pumping his fastball in there. He had a great slider, but he couldn't locate to save his life when he got to Toronto. And so, they took him on
when he was in Arizona. He was
in Arizona too, but he did have that all-star season in Arizona that people tend to forget about a little bit.
No, yeah, right? I know. I just remember like when he would play against LA, like there were just a lot of times where they would smoke him just because he couldn't locate.
Exactly. So Robbie Ray has had like a very interesting career arc. If you look at like when he's locating that fastball and when he's getting that slider off the plate, he's got a lot of success. He's got that all-star season in Arizona. He's now got the Cy Young in Toronto, and the Jays put a lot of faith that Pete Walker would be able to unlock that, but they didn't necessarily commit the money that would suggest they had full confidence in him. So I would say it was a little bit of the Jays were being cautious when they made the move, and I can understand why they'd be cautious in the negotiations this offseason as well.
And you mentioned the control issues with Robbie Ray. The Mariners are hoping, and I mean, you take that situation and that deal when you can if you're the Mariners. But you met the one game that really stands to mind. I'm sure it really burns in the memory of a lot of Jays fans this past season. You remember that game against the Yankees? There, Robbie Ray, I believe it was one of his last starts with Toronto, and they were pushing for that playoff spot. And then that one inning, just blew. He got his handles blown off. The Yankees were bashing everything over the ballpark, and they ended up losing that game. And it really did cost them that playoff if you're really looking at the grand scheme of things. So I guess that's one area where the control is a bit of an issue for Ray. When you're looking at Gosman, this is one thing I remember. I think I said it to Evan, or I might have said it in a group
You
chat
said
somewhere.
it to me.
I think so. The one thing, and I love Gosman, that splitter is ridiculous. It is lights out.
It's probably one of the best. It's probably like on top of Shohei splitter. I mean, it is disgusting.
I think I'd put Chapman splitter above it too, but still, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the one thing I just want to say about Gosman is that I just haven't seen, aside from last year, he was absolutely lights out dominant for a very strong San Francisco team. I just personally haven't seen anything sustainable with his records. Like he's always got that negative record. I think he's only finished above 500 with his record, maybe 3 or 4 times in his career. I have the stats in front of me, but I don't know. I know he's reinvented himself in San Fran. Pete Walker is an amazing coach. I think it's going to work out very swimmingly, but there's that one thing in the back of my mind where like, he doesn't have that great of a longevity, even with that pitch arsenal that he has. So not really a risk that the Jays are taking, but a little cause for concern, no?
The other interesting thing there, and I don't know if maybe Evan can speak more to this because obviously he's watched a few more Gosman games than the rest of us have. But
unfortunately,
he didn't have a great end to the season last year, and that seems to be the thing that a lot of people tend to focus on when they want to criticize this move by the Blue Jays, is that Gosman really fell off after the All-Star break. So I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit. What you kind of saw.
It was really, I mean, like he fell off just because I think like the standard was set so high. I mean, he was unbelievable in the first half of the year, and his pitches were still hitting, but I mean, I'm sorry, like his pitches were still accurate, and I mean, like that splitter just fooled the shit out of every Dodger player. But it was just interesting. Like he seemed almost easier to hit, and I just remember like guys like, I mean, you read this lineup, like guys like Trey Turner and Mookie Betts were just finding ways to finally connect with him, and I think that's when the Dodgers won in San Francisco. I think that's when Gosman was pitching Game 2, and it gets to the 6th inning, and all of a sudden it's bases loaded, and then Bellinger hits what was 5 feet away from being a grand slam, and then the very next pitch, AJ Pollock rips a double down the left field line, and then it's 6-1 when it was 2-1 legit 5 minutes ago, and it was just insane to see that, and I was just like, I couldn't believe that was Kevin Gosman, because Logan Webb is someone who had a weird first half, but then exploded the second half. And then it was vice versa for Gosman. So I think it's perfect, though, for Toronto. If they could do what they did with Robbie Ray. Yeah. I'll say the one thing, though, is that Robbie Ray, isn't he a left-handed pitcher?
Robbie Ray is a lefty, yes.
Kevin Gosman's a righty. So you lose that gold, you know what I mean? Like it's hard.
Yeah, you lost Steven Matz as well, right? Yeah. So you're like, really betting on Ryu to be that lefty in the rotation to shore that up.
You lost that gold, you know what I mean? Like the pit, like the teams that have success in the playoffs are the teams that can go righty, lefty, or like even, like that's, they can rotate that. So they lost that. So
especially for a team too that only really has one reliable lefty out of the pen in Tim Meza.
Yeah,
it's not. You're playing a dangerous game there.
Yeah, it's definitely dangerous. But I just wanted to switch over to the Dodgers again, who finally kept someone. He kept someone, and I like Chris Taylor, 4 years, $60 million, $15 million a year. I think that was an absolute steal of a contract, and I'll say absolute steal because Chris Taylor's market, according to John Heyman, MLB insider, there were 18 teams that were after Chris Taylor, which is just insane to think because 3 or maybe 4 years ago, Chris Taylor was traded to the Dodgers for a player to be named later. Like, like he was traded for like some bum that doesn't even have worthiness enough to have his name listed in the trade. And it was just crazy to me that he just turned into this whole versatile, like what they call super utility man. And he was so clutch in the postseason, which I'm so happy for, because leading up to the postseason, I think they said he was 4 for 68 batting. And it was just absolutely revitalized in October, which seems to be the common theme for Dodger players, as we saw Jock Peterson absolutely mashing home runs. And I forgot to say, I was going to say that, talking about the Dodgers, I told you guys, I think Jock Peterson's going to come back to LA because there's uncertainty with AJ Pollock in terms of his injury and just age. And Jock Peterson's a free agent. There's reports that the Braves aren't going to re-sign him. I think the Dodgers really miss Jocktober, and I think he could fit in that left field spot. Sorry, like ADHD moment. In terms of Chris Taylor, I think it's a steal for the reason that Trey Turner's a free agent after this year. He's in that arbitration year of his deal. I hope the Dodgers can re-sign him. If they don't, it sucks. But then I think you can make Chris Taylor your starting shortstop at 15 million a year. And look, I love Trey Turner. I think he's also another top 5 shortstop, possibly even top 3, just given his speed. And I mean, he hits 320 every year. But if you can also keep Chris Taylor at starting shortstop for 15 million a year, I mean, you could get some very viable free agents even next year, because then you'll have Jansen off the books, Trey Turner off the books, Corey Seager off the books, Max Scherzer's off the books. I mean, and Andrew Friedman is probably the smartest GM in baseball. That's why you see the Rays and the Dodgers being so competitive. It's because Andrew Friedman built both of those franchises. He came from Tampa Bay, and then he went to LA, and he's just smart with his money. He knows when to pull the trigger on guys. I mean, I think before he signed Mookie Betts, or I mean, before they traded for Mookie Betts in that blockbuster deal, their biggest signing was AJ Pollock at 5 years, 55 million. Like, that's all he had done was get Pollock. And that was because he was killing the Dodgers. So he's like, why don't you come to us and help us out? But I don't know. I want to get your guys' thoughts on Chris Taylor. It's super rare to see a utility guy have like that much value, considering the Dodgers got him for like nothing.
Yeah, and the thing about value is that it usually just goes up if you put in the work, which he has. And I have noticed, I know I'm a big, like I mentioned, I've played the game very long. I can notice a little bit of little things that get tweaked over the course of a couple of years. His swing, if you didn't notice, and I don't believe he didn't, his swing has changed extensively over the last 3 or 4 years. It's gone towards more of an the league tends to go towards an upwards motion where you're just going for the long ball all the time. Whereas in the old school days, it was hit down the ball, sort of slice it, get that bottom part of the ball, and it's going to fly with that backspin. Now you started creating your own regular backspin. Chris Taylor did that. He put in the work in the cage, and I'm really happy to see the results. And I want to clear up what I said about Chris Taylor at the beginning, just because I don't want Evan attacking me, because that's a pretty scary beast coming at you. And I don't want any other Dodgers fan attacking me, just because I just wanted to say the Dodgers, I really want them to say, keep a big name, a sexier name. Chris Taylor, to me, isn't really a sexy name, but he's a name that's worth throwing around. I think is a name worth keeping, because that versatility plays a very massive role in where you use them. Pardon me, Evan?
I was going to ask you the question. Do you mean by a sexy name like them trying to then re-sign Trey Turner?
Yeah, like trying to maybe keep Trey Turner. That would be a nice one to have.
I definitely think that's their plan. It definitely felt like they were picking between Turner and Seager, and I think the reason why they just went with Trey Turner is that he has one more year at 13 million. Yeah. So it just made more sense to keep him.
No, exactly. And it's nothing major, obviously. I just would have liked to see, and it would be awesome to keep Chris Taylor and someone else as well. But if you're the Dodgers, you take Chris Taylor. He's a terrific talent. And the fact that he went from a player to be named later trade to a team where, like I believe you said, 18 other franchises were looking into him.
Yeah,
it speaks volume on his work ethic. He's definitely one of the clutchest guys on the roster, one of the clutchest guys in the league when you're looking at playoff success. So definitely a win for the Dodgers. I'm sure Mateo's going to speak a little bit more light on it as well. But no, I'm a huge fan of it. I personally do think it's a steal as well. And versatility goes a long way, man. You put in the work, you put in the hours, and Chris Taylor took what was his. Yeah. Quote the Rock.
Quote the Rock on that one. Yeah, I think the more we look into baseball and the more teams sort of shift to this, this newer mindset of, trying to make the most of the players that they have, the more value that the utility player has in baseball. And I think Chris Taylor, you said it was a $15 million deal. I don't remember the
4 years, 60 million.
I think that's a steal of a contract for a guy like Chris Taylor. I think he's a fabulous player. I think you can plug him and play him at anywhere except for catcher, and
pitcher.
and pitcher. But he's a guy that's gonna produce, and he's gonna play exceptional defense at pretty much any position. And I think you look at a guy like Chris Taylor. It's really easy to go back a couple of years and look at a guy in World Series MVP Ben Zobrist, right? A guy who was a utility player, a guy who was playing everywhere, and a guy who sort of set this trend and paved the way for utility players in the future. Because, up until then, it was kind of like if you were a utility player, you were the backup infielder. You were the, you know, the shortstop, second base, left field guy on the bench,
Yeah.
right? You were like Darwin Barney.
Oh
Hey,
my
I remember
God,
that
that
guy.
Yeah.
dude, I forgot about him.
But I actually have, funnily enough, since we're talking about him.
No, don't tell me you have a jersey of his.
No,
There's no chance.
my game glove is actually Darwin Barney's model from when he won his Gold Glove
Wow.
in Chicago. Yeah,
Oh wow.
that's just an interesting thing. But yeah, up until, you know, you saw Ben Zobrist sort of break that mold as like, you know, from utility to super utility, right? And I think Chris Taylor is one of those guys on that upper echelon of super utility players that I think you can definitely justify shelling out 15 million for.
Yeah.
I'm honestly a little mad he didn't come to Toronto, but you know, with the
Well,
whole league in on him,
yeah.
I'm glad he found a home in LA where he can be competitive and he can, you know, contribute to a winning team.
Well, I was just happy, like when he said it was a matter, it was always LA. It was just a matter of if they would offer me what I
Yeah.
want. And if 15 million, I mean, dude, I would give that to him regardless of if he was like
I think it's a
considered.
steal. I think it's a
Yeah.
steal,
And that's what
honestly.
I was saying. It's like he could become your starting shortstop, and I would have no problem with it. And I don't think it's really, Mary, I'll just say, I don't really think it matters of sexy names in LA because the winning is the most important thing. And
At the end of the day, it
Chris,
is.
and I also just wanted to say that there's always like, you know, that conception that like the Dodgers built like a super team or whatever. And I mean, I always get pissed when people say that just for the mere fact that a lot of the guys that they have are homegrown players or guys that they found and turned into stars. So like if you look at a guy like Chris Taylor, who they traded from, who they got from Seattle, Justin Turner from the Mets. I mean, he was struggling with the Orioles and the Mets, and then he comes to the Dodgers. He's an all-star. Max Muncy was waived by the Athletics, and then Farhan Zaidi picked him up, and now he's hitting 35 home runs minimum a year when healthy. Walker Bueller was a draft pick. Corey Seager was a draft pick. Will Smith was late in the first round. I mean, like it's a credit to them what they're able to build homegrown, and then I mean, obviously they're gonna make trades. Like it's like they're not gonna make trades. Like that's why I get upset when people say the whole super team thing because it's like yes they have players, but they developed about 60, maybe even like 80% of that roster is, and even Alex Vesia, who was in the Marlins last year with an 18 ERA, comes to the Dodgers and has a 2 ERA.
Yeah, I think the narrative behind the Dodgers' success is really like, or at least up until maybe a year ago, it was heavily focused on the fact that, you know, they're constantly above the luxury tax. They have been ever since they've had this playoff streak. I think the narrative was always like the Dodgers by their playoff appearances, but I don't think that could be any further from the truth. I think the Dodgers are doing it the right way. They're spending money when they have to spend money. They've got a great prospect development system, and they're not afraid to shell some of those prospects out for major league talent.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I was gonna say, I'm sorry, I'm just so excited. But if you want to
No,
continue,
go ahead. I'm saying like I want to sort of break down that narrative that the Dodgers buy championships because that's an argument that I have heard before. I
yeah,
don't think it could be any further from the truth. I think that's just what happens when your management is miles ahead of the rest of the league.
yeah,
The,
for
the
sure.
Yankees, on the other hand,
Yeah, the
they haven't
Yankees
bought
are
any
different.
championships yet, but they
Yeah.
look to
they
pave
try
the
though.
road.
They
Yeah.
try.
Well, I was gonna say with
Go on,
the
go on.
Dodgers, I don't know if you, I mean, you probably don't follow them as extensively as I do, but I remember when the Dodgers traded Alex Wood, Yasiel Puig, and Matt Kemp to the Cincinnati Reds. The two guys that they acquired were Josiah Gray and Jeter Downs. The Dodgers turned Jeter Downs into Mookie Betts and turned Josiah Gray into Max Scherzer and
Yep.
Trey Turner.
Yep.
And I mean, they also had Kybert Ruiz, who I think is a fantastic player. But the one thing that sucks is that they have Will Smith and Austin Barnes already there. So it's kind of just like the Dodgers had so many prospects that it's like, what are you going to do
There's no
with
room
them?
for them. Yeah,
Like,
exactly. You
it's
have to
not
trade
that,
them.
like, it's not like it's a credit to them, but it's also just like, you can't blame them. Like,
Mhm.
what are you going to, like, you can't keep Ruiz down in the minors. It's not fair to him as a player. And they needed to give him
And
an
he's going to be a
MLB
great
spot.
player too. He's
I
going to
think
be a great player for the
I think
Nationals.
in 5 or 6 years from now, I think he's going to be a top 5 catcher. His
Switch hitter as well. Like
switch hitter, power. I mean, he needs to stay with the Nationals because the Nationals need to build around,
mhm.
as stupid as it sounds, building around a catcher. I mean, I think having Juan Soto and Kybert Ruiz is like the two.
And Kibu, man, he's a pretty darn good
Yeah.
prospect too. No,
Yeah, but yeah, for sure. And I just we have a few more just before we wrap it up here. Marcus Stroman going to Chicago for 3 years, 71 million. I have nothing else to say other than that is an overpay. I think he is overrated. I don't think he's a great starting pitcher. I think he's a egotistical guy who had his run in Toronto. It didn't work out in New York. Any team that was competitive with the Mets absolutely slapped Marcus Stroman when they went up against him. I think the only reason he went to Chicago was because no other team wanted him to pay him over 20 million a year.
He's a very vocal player. That's there's no disputing that. I believe his saying's height doesn't measure heart or something, and he's keeping it going with his third team. I remember him in Toronto, and we were growing up, me and Mateo. He was our prime growing up years when he was with the playoff teams. He was probably one of my favorite players just because of what he brought to the table. He was in his prime, which is
that story too about how he came back from that injury just in time for the playoffs.
Yeah, with Duke, I think he went in rehab with Duke and came back from it. It was just a terrific situation, a terrific story with Marcus Stroman. And then he goes to the Mets and he gets bounced over to the Cubs. And he's not the same player. He's not I would totally side with you, Evan. I am not a big fan of Marcus Stroman whatsoever. I personally think the Cubs just kind of brought him in just because purely I don't know, maybe to just kind of show your fan base that you're trying to maybe strive to make something better now. I'm not too sure what the message was.
Yeah, I mean, Stroman is a very interesting player. He's a very polarizing player. He absolutely destroyed the Jays locker room on his way out. Mm-hmm. And, he did the same in New York. And so I think, as Chicago, you have to, manage that risk. But I think if you look at the general reaction to Stroman, you have a lot of people that hate him, but you have a lot of people in this city that 5 years later still adore the guy. They were begging for him to come back in free agency. They wanted Shapiro's head on a stake for not making an offer kind of thing. Like It's Stroman, when he captures the hearts of a fan base, can become a player that fans can get behind, especially if he's satisfied in his role. So, I mean, if you take the risk, Chicago's got a lot of money to spend now that they got all their big contracts off the books. So you take the risk. And if he becomes that kind of a player, then he becomes, a player that Chicago Cubs fans can rally around while their team is going through this rebuild. Right. And it becomes a little bit of a distraction.
I'd argue you can't add a price tag to that either. Like that's something that just works.
I'd argue that you don't have to care about the price tag because, you're not worried about competing. Right. So, absolutely. You try to keep salaries as low as possible, but you can afford to pay a guy if it's going to keep your morale happy.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know.
The only thing is if it goes wrong, your locker room is torched and you have to start over. So.
Yeah, that's why. And I just think 3 years for that much money for what little, like, I think if he went to a contending team, he's the third starter. Like, I don't think he has the skill level to be a number one anymore. And that's just,
I thought the Angels were going to be a good fit for him, to be honest.
Dude, like, I don't think the Angels have a great pitching staff.
They don't.
Like, the only reason Shohei Ohtani's striving is because he was already incredible in Japan. Like, it was hard to F that up anymore.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't have a great pitching staff. And, they also drafted 21 pitchers. I don't know if you guys saw that.
They only took pitchers. I know.
They only took pitchers in their draft, which, credit to them because like they don't have. I think they have a pretty decent offense, but it's just like the pitching gives them zero help. I know we're running a little short on time.